All right. Welcome to March already, and our policy board meeting for March 2nd of the Richmond Regional Transportation and Planning Organization. We'll start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise as able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome. If any board members have anybody here that they would like to introduce, please do so. All right. We will start then with, dive right in and do the roll call and certify that we have a quorum. Ms. Firestone.
Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart. Cross City County, Mr. Atkins. Mr. Coda. Mr. Coda.
Here.
Thank you. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Here.
Mr. Holland.
Here.
Mr. Winslow.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Richland County, Chair Lumpkins.
Here.
Ms. Lascalette. Hanover County, Mr. Davis. Vice Chair Peterson.
Here.
Ms. Pritchard. Henrico County, Ms. O'Bannon. Here. Mr. Thornton.
Here.
Mr. Brannon. New Kent County, Ms. Page. Mr. Tiller. Mr. Evelyn. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Here.
Ms. Carmack.
Here.
City of Richmond, Mr. Addison.
Here.
Ms. Jordan. Here. Ms. Lynch. Dr. Newville. Mr. Jones. Ms. Nye. Ms. Robertson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC, Ms. Adams.
Here.
Ms. Torres. RMTA, Ms. Dean.
Here.
VDOT, Mr. Totten.
Here.
Mr. Riblett.
Here.
CTAC, Ms. Guthrie. Here. Ms. Erickson. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. Here. Mr. Sparks. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Rucker. FTA, Mr. Koenig. Ride Finders, Ms. Tisdale. Ms. Ruffin. And Virginia Department of Aviation, Mr. Harrington. Please, the roll call for attendance.
I see Ms.
Do you have a
Torres'
quorum?
name on the screen. I don't think.
I was gonna circle back. She did indicate she was gonna going to participate remotely, and I will,
Yeah.
note her presence.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Good catch. Yeah, she does look. Ms. Torres. Ms. Torres, can you hear us?
She is here. She stepped away from her desk, but she will be attending.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And did you say we have a quorum?
We do, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, diving right in. Are there any requests to amend the meeting agenda that we all should have in front of us? I'm going to make one change, or new business part B, just before item 1. I'm going to slip in a quick discussion. The executive committee this morning, on our agenda this morning, was a discussion about CTAC and their role and CTACs and the policy board's desire to engage CTAC a little bit more. So we're going to have a recommendation. We'll slide in there before we hear from Ms. DeBrule. So other than that change, if nobody else has any other requests for any agenda amendments, I'm going to proceed as if we have this adopted agenda. On our chair report, what were we going to cover? Did we have something that we wanted to add there? I can't remember, I think maybe it was what I just am gonna add, yeah, so. All right, so I don't have any.
Chair,
Yeah, Mr.
form, the transportation form.
Somebody's transportation form updated here. Yeah, let's do it here. Thank you, Mr. Hodges, that you brought that to our attention, I didn't write it down. So, I'm gonna turn it over to Parsons to just give us a, brief update on the transportation forum. You all should have gotten an invitation yesterday, I think it came out yesterday, for March 17th, 8 to 10 a.m. at the Main Street Station. And Jed, if you could share some more details for the policy board.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. You covered all the big details, which is it's Friday, March 17th at Main Street Station. Hopefully everybody in the room did get an email yesterday with a registration link for the event. I'd ask that you please make sure that everybody in your shop is aware and able to attend. There's plenty of room, and we're looking forward to a great event. The agenda is, when you go into the registration, the agenda is listed there, and speakers are confirmed. We are ironing out all of the additional details now between now and the date of the event, but it's going to be a great forum. It's a partnership this year with Chamber RBA, utilizing a lot of their expertise in pulling off big events like this. So we expect that the attendance will be a lot larger than years past, and we're looking forward to a great discussion and sharing of information on the table.
And it's short, like was the main request of the group. It's very short, so that's good. Do you want to share about the RVA Engage that you shared with us? Share that with the group, please.
Yes, sir. Some of you may be aware that there's a group called RVA Engage that has been doing virtual education sessions every couple months. There is one that is now set up for Wednesday, March 15th, from 6 to 7:30. So it is virtual, and you can register at rvaengage.org. The title of the event is Transportation, Why It Matters and What You Can Do. So the guest speakers are Ms. Clark from the City of Richmond Office of Equitable Transit and Mobility, Ms. Smidler from Henrico County, Ms. Torres from GRTC, Mr. Tyndall from Sports Backers, and myself. And then the moderator is Ian Stewart from VPM. So it should be a great conversation about transportation, really just to lay things out and get everything out on the table in terms of why transportation does make a difference and what any of us can do to make sure that it gets the attention it needs. So we could certainly pass on more information. I believe there is actually a flyer on the bar out in the lobby with a QR code. If you wanted to scan that, we can make sure, and we can pass on more information if you'd like it.
Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chairman, I hope that we will probably do something, in my opinion, that we have not done for these two conferences. Is there a way in which we can get, I'm gonna use a word I haven't used for a good while, some of the people from the community I call the underserved. If we could get some of those persons to meetings like this, I think it will help what we're trying to do. We still don't get those, I'm gonna use this word gradually, the little person, the little person who votes and all those persons. We need to tap into that. Now, I don't have the answer, but if we had some mode of transportation and identify some and could bring them to some of these conferences, it's what we've been trying to do. Mr. Williams is familiar with this, our purpose for several years. But we still have another avenue that we may have not tried. Just a suggestion.
That's a good one. Thank you.
thought on this.
Ms. O'Bannon?
I know one of them is virtual. Is the other one gonna be video streamed live or something?
It is not.
The
It's gonna be in person.
transportation forum.
Yes.
Well, the other one, could not they be streamed into the library room and folks could get to the library?
You talking about the other one being RVA Engage meeting?
Yeah,
the live
the other one. since it is virtual, right?
And it's in the evening.
Okay, you could have, set it up in the library, any library, I mean, all of the libraries, you know, here in Chesterfield or Hanover or whatever. And if they present where you could get to that library, you know, then at least you could participate that way virtually. So is there a way to set that up? You can talk to librarians, you know, New Kent, Charleston, whatever.
And appropriately communicated accordingly.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Because you got people not aware they're not gonna be there, or not attending the library.
Well, I think the library would obviously post something, and whoever wants to promote it, you know, yeah.
And when Mr. Thornton was speaking, I was thinking of CTAC, and I think,
Yeah, we got.
Yes, I have my hand up.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I'm
Mr. Lumpkins. Lisa Guthrie with representing CTAC, and I live in New Kent County. And I think that the fact that it's virtual means that anybody can participate, but unless a constituency knows about it and knows the importance of it, you know, they're not gonna participate. You're gonna be talking to yourselves, you know, in terms of people participating. It's the usual suspects that are involved in transportation professionally or on a board such as the TPO. So to get to the community groups, you know, it's the work that has to be done to engage them to the point that they believe that it's important, and then they'll participate more. So I think that maybe as we talk more about CTAC's role and the representatives on CTAC, like League of Women Voters, some of the bike ped groups, environmental groups, you know, making sure that they're involved in putting the actual programs together and communicating to their members and getting down to the level where people who use the services are actually voicing their opinions.
Well,
thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
And I think our little CTAC discussion that I was trying to
Yeah.
squeeze in before we get to Mr. Brule,
Okay.
DeBrule might be a little longer if you don't mind helping us along.
I just thought that doing it in someplace like a library, public
Yep,
space,
absolutely.
people who don't have computers,
Sure.
maybe could go there,
Yeah.
you know, get close in line.
Yeah, I don't know, you know, I think like at the executive committee, you asked the question jokingly, well, why does transportation matter? And I think our answer was, well, you need to tune in to the meeting to find out. But yeah, exactly. So I think, I don't know what they have on tap, because they don't have, other than the flyer, and I'm looking at RVA Engage's website, and they do a lot more than transportation. I think they're trying to engage the community in conversations on a variety of topics. So I think it will be worth tuning in, and to the extent that the TPO can support what Ms. O'Bannon is talking about, maybe we can, you know, I don't know if our connections to the library are, but I mean, I think that Henrico has amazing library system. I mean,
Yeah.
do we know anybody in RV Engage?
We do, but if I can make a
Please.
editorial comment.
Absolutely.
I think that the beauty of this organization is that we're all around the table right now. And everybody at this table has a responsibility not just to attend the meetings here, but to go back and share the information in your different communities. So I think that the library question is a great one. We could certainly do what we can on our staff side, but I would imagine that Henrico County has an easy avenue to talk to Henrico County libraries.
I think
And likewise for other organizations.
Yeah.
So I think the sharing of information out of this forum is a really powerful one.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
if I could add one item to this,
Please.
as a suggestion for our staff to reach out and to our television stations locally as a public service announcement that this is going to take place would address some of Ms. Guthrie's concerns. We need some way other than just an email going out. And,
Agreed.
this would
Any other comments on that?
Virginia Public Media is on here somewhere.
Okay, so, Ms. O'Bannon, I'm gonna turn it over to you I think we have a video. What I've been doing since I've been chair is take 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the meetings to highlight a jurisdiction, and Henrico County, lovely Henrico County is up tonight, this morning. So Ms. O'Bannon, if you want to make some introductory remarks, the floor is yours.
very short introduction and a nice video.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, 2023 is the year of the rabbit, according to the Chinese calendar, and it seems to be the right animal for this year because in Henrico, things have been jumping. Okay, video. Cue video. Uh-oh, it was there a minute ago.
Yeah, it'll be back. There we go.
9 things have happened over the last 6 weeks.
Well, it's been closed for more than a decade, but we found a new way to get additional use out of this property to enable the installation of solar panels on about 2 acres of the top of this hill. The electricity will be used to operate the pump station that's right behind us, and we'll expect to save more than $600,000 over the next 30 years.
That's the county land.
This station is a symbol of excellence within our division of fire, the county's first 4-base station situated in the very heart of Henrico County. Its purpose, to protect you and your family. Its strength, the men and women who are blessed to wear the turnout gear and call this house a home.
And this morning, with everyone in attendance, it gives me great pleasure to announce that our very own Jackson Baynard is going to be our next fire chief. Jackson, come on up here.
We know we have some work ahead of us, but we're committed to it, and I know the men and women of this organization are committed to it. We're one team, we're one mission moving forward.
Today, we're thrilled to be able to announce another milestone, another key partner for Green City.
It will include residential and commercial uses, including an arena that will drive tourism and provide world-class entertainment for our visitors as well as our residents.
For ASM Global, this is more than an arena. This is an opportunity to create an integrated and cohesive sports, entertainment, and hospitality district that operates as one.
Today, we're pleased to announce a proposal for a new credit for property owners.
The proposed credit is equal to 2 cents per $100 of assessed value for all properties. The current single-family median price of a home is $367,000, which will result in a tax credit of $73.40.
And in Henrico, tax relief has always been a priority. The proposed tax credit is part of Henrico's proud tradition of providing the best services for the lowest cost to the taxpayer.
So earlier this evening in work session, the board met a gentleman named Charles Fuldisi, who has worked for the county for over 40 years. Mr. Fuldisi donated a home and 2 lots to the county. He also, during that presentation, pulled a check out of his pocket and donated $100,000 to Henrico County so that residents in the area could actually hook up to public water and sewer, and that we may discontinue well service.
Today's announcement has to do with recycling. Specifically, we are talking about a significant investment the Board of Supervisors will be considering as part of the upcoming budget, where we will be providing one of these carts to each single-family home in the county's curbside recycling program. That is 90,000 carts provided at no cost to the 90,000 homes that will be receiving them.
Today, we are announcing the Henrico County Encore program. This program will give our county another tool to ensure that we are staffed in the vital areas of public safety and mental health. To accomplish this, we are tapping an excellent talent pool, our own retirees.
It's an incredible honor to gather this morning and officially break ground for the much anticipated Taylor Farm Park here in Sandston.
And we're building a park for the Sandston community, but also for the entirety of the Varina District and Henrico County in general.
The focus of this proposed budget is you. It is you, the employees, our amazing employees. Because of you, ladies and gentlemen, The county manager in his proposed budget that we're talking about this morning is afforded the unique opportunity to provide all general government and schools employees with the single largest across-the-board pay increase since 1991 in 33 years. That figure, ladies and gentlemen, is 8.2%.
Okay. That was February.
I was gonna, we saw the dates, so that was just the last few weeks.
So stay tuned, what's in store for the rest of 2023, okay?
Thanks, Ms. O'Bannon, really appreciate that, that's very good.
It's called Sheila's Cell.
That's good. A lot going on and a lot just in the last few weeks. All right, we'll open the meeting to the public comment period now. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak for the policy board? Is there anybody online that has indicated?
No, sir.
Okay, we will open and close the public comment period, and
Ms. Page has joined us remotely, and I'm admitting her now as a panelist.
thank you. Good morning, Ms. Page.
Good morning, all.
So we're up to the meeting.
Sorry.
Hanover County ringtone.
Sorry about that, folks.
All right, approval of the last month's policy board meeting minutes. The chair will entertain a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman.
Mr. Williams, thank you, Mr. Warren.
Second.
Jordan, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Now we will move to the consent agenda. A couple of items in there. Mr. Parsons, could you give us a quick review? And again, if there's anything policy board members want pulled out for separate discussion, we'll do so. But seeing none, just go ahead and give us a quick review if you would, and then we'll.
Yes, sir, thank you. Two items. The first item, 5A, is a letter of support for DRPT's grant application for the Federal Railroad Administration Corridor Identification and Development Program for the Commonwealth Corridor. That's in page 10 of your agenda. The action is approving the letter of support. And then the second item, 5B, is approving the work status and financial report for January of 23.
If it's approved, do y'all have a letter for me to sign?
Yes.
Any questions?
This is about expanding east-west transportation. Well, we went pretty much.
Yes, ma'am.
Move for approval. For the consent agenda.
Mr. Peterson moved to approve our consent
Second.
agenda, and Mr. Williams seconded. Any discussion? All, go ahead, Ms. O'Bannon.
No, I'm sorry.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you, that passed. Real quickly, we added the, so this morning at the executive committee meeting, we continued what's been discussed the last several meetings. The CTAC update and role discussion is how it was titled in our executive committee meeting. And there's different thoughts, some of it we touched on briefly. So the sense I think that we get is that when we're asking CTAC to engage, and then the question becomes, well, what are we asking you to do? What are we asking CTAC to do? And then, of course, I think CTAC's reflecting back, like, well, what do you want from us? So I think we can talk about from a policy board level what we would like to see, but I'm so glad Ms. Guthrie's here, because where we landed on the executive committee was, why don't we invite the entire CTAC to one of our next meetings and set aside time to have this discussion so that we can have that two-way discussion about what are the policy board's thoughts on what CTAC can do, and then how to, because we're impressed when we look at the membership and the interest that these folks, various folks represent. So I know my sense, and I think the executive committee sense, is that there's a lot of talent there, and you all might have thoughts. And we looked at the slideshow that you all had at your January meeting. We talked about some of the things that were in that discussion, and I went to the end, and I saw at the end it said, one of the possible areas of discussion is, participation and engagement on what's happening locally, local projects. And my sense is that would be certainly one that we should talk about and consider, but I don't want to preempt the broad discussion about, wide-ranging discussion. So the executive committee's recommendation to the policy board is that we invite the CTAC to one of our policy board meetings and put it on the agenda to have a discussion about CTAC's role. And I'm going to jump. Mr. Gregory pointed in our executive committee discussion, pointed out that the CTAC is in our bylaws, because there was a question in the executive committee, well, is the CTAC a requirement? Is it a legal requirement, regulatory requirement? It is not, but it is in our bylaws. And I'll just read the one sentence that states the purpose in our bylaws. It says the purpose of this committee, referring to CTAC, is to advise the MPO on issues, plans, studies, and matters necessary and appropriate for providing viable and reasonable citizen input. So I think with that simple background, we would like to have the CTAC join us and set aside 20 minutes or whatever it takes to have a good discussion.
Great, and our next meeting is March 16th, so maybe Chet can help me make this presentation and get a sense of the body of when, if you would want that in May. They meet again in May, so we can talk about what would be an appropriate time for the CTAC to come to this meeting.
Perfect. So are you all now, are you starting back in person with this month's meeting?
Our next meeting, March the 16th, will be in person.
Is it you keeping a hybrid option for people to remote in, or what's the plan, do you know?
I don't know that we've discussed that.
Okay.
So I know that we've advertised it as an in-person meeting.
Oh, good to know. Thank you. And you all will be meeting here?
Here.
Right. All right, any discussion from policy board members about that item? I think we did kind of turn it into an action item, so I'll move that we invite CTAC to one of our policy board meetings in the next month or two, as or authorize Chet to work with Lisa and get it on our agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Motion second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Okay. Thank you again, Ms. Guthrie.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Brule, we're so thankful and glad to have you here. Good to have you back. And I think, like you said, anywhere but a legislative meeting is
You're here. I'm here. I'm not speaking before a General Assembly committee today, so that makes today a good day. Thank you for the opportunity to come today and talk a little bit about what we do at DRPT and our programs and how we can collaborate more. I've got some slides. This may in fact be the presentation I use for House Transportation, but with a few little extra nuggets in there. So if we can go to the next slide. Just today I'm going to talk a little bit about the agency, what we're doing to connect the Commonwealth, how we're ensuring the efficient allocation of state funds, and what we see kind of in the future for both transit and rail. So a little history, this is our 30th anniversary. DRPT was created in 1992 by the General Assembly to put a laser focus on how we allocate state funding, state and federal funding for transit and rail, really to help advance and plan a program of projects around the Commonwealth through our leadership and technical assistance to move more Virginians by transit and rail. That mission remains unchanged today. We connect and improve the quality of life for all Virginians through our innovative transportation solutions and our vision as a connected Commonwealth that serves every person, every business, and every need. Next slide. We work with a lot of different stakeholders, partners here in the Richmond region. Obviously, we work with GRTC, ride finders. We also work through our human service programs with programs like Hanover Dash, which I worked with Mr. Peterson on a few years ago, and it's doing really, really well. We work with MPOs like the TPO here, the railroads, both the short line and freight railroads, partner with Amtrak, and also have our DRPT supported or managed intercity bus operator that has service here in Richmond, which is the Virginia Breeze. Go on to the next slide, and that's a really old GRTC bus, that picture. Sorry, well, get some new pictures. We spent a lot of time telling our story through data. One of the things that we are tracking really closely, I update the Commonwealth Transportation Board every month on where we are with transit ridership. The past few years have been incredibly challenging for the transit industry. It has, I'm incredibly proud, sorry, now go. Phone's ringing, oh my gosh. We've just been incredibly proud of how well our transit agencies like GRTC have done over the past 2 years in responding to COVID, keeping our communities moving, providing those vital connections. Now we're really focused on ridership recovery. We've put a lot of time and effort and funding really into what we can do from the state perspective to partner with our transit agencies to recover ridership. Our trends are all heading in the right direction. GRTC in Richmond has been a leader in that, been way out front of the rest of the state. Ridership here in Richmond exceeds pre-pandemic levels. Really, Richmond's leading the way for the rest of the Commonwealth. Our rural transit systems are also doing quite well. What we've seen lag behind are the metro system in Washington, D.C., Virginia Railway Express, the commuter rail. Really, that is largely driven by the federal workforce that hasn't come back to the office in great numbers. But we are seeing those trends change with WMATA and VRE as well. We're starting, particularly with WMATA, we're seeing an uptick. And what we're seeing is travel behaviors are changing. People don't, get into the office at 8 o'clock in the morning, go home at 5 o'clock and look for those commuter-driven operations like they used to. Our systems that are doing very well are the systems that have been able to adapt and change their services to meet new commuting paradigms, new needs of their communities. WMATA sees a lot more ridership in the evenings and on the weekends than they did prior to the pandemic. So it's interesting to just see how things are changing, and we are seeing that through the data. We can go on to the next slide. I'm very proud of our Virginia Breeze system. This is our intercity bus program where we have 4 routes that operate daily across the Commonwealth. We do have one route, the Capital Connector, that makes connections here through Richmond. Just this week, staff was at an American Public Transportation Association conference where we received a first place award for our marketing campaign for the Virginia Breeze. Our ridership in this program is far exceeding our pre-pandemic levels, and it goes along with the trends that we're seeing that people are moving around, maybe not in the ways that they did before the pandemic, but in terms of intercity travel, leisure travel, we see a lot more of that than we did prior to the pandemic. And so this program is also doing quite well. Go on to the next slide. Switching over to rail and Amtrak. Amtrak, same trend. We're seeing our ridership continually exceed pre-pandemic levels on our Amtrak state-supported routes. Every month I ask the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, can I continue to say last month was a record breaker? And they keep telling me I can say that. So we set an all-time ridership record for Amtrak Virginia in August. And since then, every successive month has broken the record for that particular month all time. So our Amtrak program is very strong, continuing to see really nice recovery with the rail side as well. Go on to the next slide. Just touching briefly on freight rail, we also do fund a lot of work to divert movement of freight and goods from trucks to rail. What the graphic on the screen shows you is the number of trucks that we're diverting from Virginia's highways with our investments in freight rail. So between 2017 and 2021, we diverted more than 50 million trucks from Virginia's highways. And so you'll see our trend for that program is also headed in the right direction. Go on to the next slide. Talk a little bit about money, because that's what everybody wants to know about. Our fiscal year 23 through 28 6-year improvement program, this is the program that the Commonwealth Transportation Board adopted in June last year, was our largest program ever at $6.2 billion. Most of that is on the public transit side, as we have, and I'll touch on this a little later, split our rail programs between passenger and freight. So I'll talk about that in a minute. So we can go on to the next slide. On the transit side, we have a number of funding programs that we have in place to help agencies like GRTC. Our operating assistance program helps those agencies offset a portion of their operating expenses. Our share that we can contribute to is capped at 30% of their certified audited operating expenditures. So the state provides a small contribution towards those operating expenses. Where you see a greater contribution is on the capital side. Our capital program we fund through state and federal funds. Capital projects, the majority of our program is focused on state of good repair. So that's replacing assets that the Commonwealth and our transit agencies have already invested in. So that's replacement buses, that's improvements to facilities, really with that fix it first approach. So that program is about $80 million a year. Our special program, this is where we have some grant funding to help programs like Ride Finders to help change people's decision-making about how they're going to travel. It's where we can do pilot projects. It's where we run all of our innovation initiatives that Tiffany does so well for us and provide technical assistance. Our federal program has grown considerably through the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We do coordinate with the Federal Transit Administration on a number of formula and discretionary programs. We saw basically with IIJA about a 30% increase overall in the federal funding that is coming to the Commonwealth for transportation or for transit. And so some of that runs through us and some of that goes directly to the transit agencies. You can go to the next slide. On the rail side, we have 3 programs on the rail side that help support the movement of freight through investments in infrastructure. Our freight program is focused on making investments that really help the Port of Virginia move more freight out of the port and across the Commonwealth. Our current program has $62 million allocated to 9 different projects. These projects are all heavily leveraged with other sources, a lot of private funding to help deliver those projects. Our Rail Industrial Access Program is a program that we kind of take up projects as they come up. In fact, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, now it's March now, okay, just last month, which was really just felt like last week, approved a project for a business in Chesterfield County to provide an additional rail siding so that business can ship more goods via rail instead of putting more trucks on the road. So that is something that we take a lot of pride in, how we can help divert goods off of the roads, but also to help expand business and grow Virginia's economy. And so last year we funded about $3.5 million in projects, but this program has a huge amount of leveraged private investment. So $3.5 million in our money that goes to building rail sidings is helping to support well over $800 million in private investment and thousands of jobs that are being created across the Commonwealth. Finally, our rail preservation program, that benefits our 9 short line railroads. They're your first mile, last mile connection to the class 1s, really do help drive Virginia's economy through connections to rail. That program is relatively small, but about $7.5 million in our program. Go to the next slide. I want to touch on a couple of other transit items before I switch back over to rail. On the transit infrastructure side, we're pushing on a couple of pretty significant issues that we hope are going to move the needle for transit in Virginia. We are working on a bus electrification conversion initiative. This is really helping us help transit agencies set themselves up for conversion to low, no emission vehicles. It doesn't necessarily mean electrification. It can support CNG and other hydrogen fuel cell, other types of fuels, but really one of the things that came out of the transit equity and modernization study was a need to look at how we can lessen the impact of transit from an environmental perspective. And this particular initiative is going to help us tap into the copious amounts of federal money that are available for low, no emission vehicles in the IIJA. So it's developing transition plans, supporting agencies with financial planning. It's more than just buying a bus and buying a charger. There's a lot of infrastructure considerations, so we want to be able to help agencies walk through that. Also on the infrastructure side, we have over 15,000 bus stops in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Most of them have no accommodations to support our users of our transit system. So we see a lot of bus stop signs stuck in the edge of the pavement or on the edge of the road. It's something GRTC has worked very hard on from a planning perspective. We want to be able to support having more infrastructure to make our bus stops safer and more accessible for the folks that use our systems. Lisa and the folks at Virginia Transit Association worked on some legislation this past session that's going to allow us to tap into some additional funding that is underutilized at this point to help move that initiative forward. So we're grateful for her partnership. Can you go to the next slide? We've also done, from the state perspective, done a lot with microtransit over the past few years, and I know that the TPO and the authority both have talked about microtransit and how it fits into a transit solution for the region. We deployed 2 rural microtransit pilots during the pandemic, one in Southwest Virginia and one in Gloucester County. They were funded through FTA's Integrated Mobility Innovation Grant Program and the Commonwealth's Innovation Technology Transportation Fund. Both of them have been incredibly successful, and we've seen leveraging technology as a way that we can provide greater accessibility, really it's driven a huge increase in accessibility and transit ridership in both of those communities for a very small cost, because in both cases, the transit agencies leveraged vehicles and operators that they already had, powered a solution by technology, and have provided more accessibility for their community. So we're really pleased with how those 2 pilots have gone. We just, late last year, funded 3 pilot projects for GRTC, as well as some other urban pilots in Newport News, Virginia Beach, and in the Albemarle, Charlottesville area. So our vision has always been to have a very well-rounded set of microtransit pilots that we can evaluate the effectiveness of different approaches. So now we have a much broader set of microtransit pilots to evaluate. Go on to the next slide. Switching over to rail, we just, and I can officially say this because we got our approval from the Federal Railroad Administration last night, we have completed our our 2022 statewide rail plan. That is something that we're required to update every 5 years. Really, the statewide rail plan is what drove the work forward on the passenger rail side and led to the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative to advance more passenger rail. So that continues in this update of the statewide rail plan. What we've placed more emphasis on in this particular rail plan update is to put the same strategic focus on freight. And what can we do to transform freight in Virginia while we're also increasing passenger rail? So this rail plan is something we'll have opportunities to come out and share more with you on. But on the freight side, it is looking much more strategically at our investments, focusing on economic development around the Commonwealth, and working with the Port of Virginia on freight fluidity and how we can get more freight moving out of the port via rail. We can go on to the next slide. I'm going to transition and I'm going to close out and talk a little bit about passenger rail. I understand you had a presentation from the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, so I will apologize in advance if I hit on anything that they said previously. But the Passenger Rail Authority was created back in 2020 by the General Assembly. We launched it out of DRPT the following year. VPRA is focused on implementation. So they were charged and given all the powers by the General Assembly that are necessary to design, build, finance rail improvements. That's not something that DRPT was ever charged with doing. So that's why having VPRA and having them with the independence of an authority was so important. They do own rail assets and rail right-of-way, so they become a lot more like VDOT than DRPT is in terms of what it means to own that rail right-of-way and have that ownership. But they always partner with others to actually operate the passenger rail. So they're partnering with the Virginia Railway Express and partnering with Amtrak. The authority itself is governed by a 15-member board. Those 15 members are appointed by the governor with staggered terms, and the VPRA board is chaired by the DRPT director, so I get to serve as the chair of that board as well. Next slide, please. Just touching on the corridor projects, and I'm sure Colin went through this in much more detail. Transforming Rail in Virginia really started with the I-95 corridor. People think about what happened back in 2019, an announcement of a $3.7 billion rail program. They thought about Long Bridge, they thought about more rail, but it is a really complex series of projects all up and down the 95 corridor. It is $4 billion in infrastructure improvements. We had our first additions of rail service as a result of this agreement that were implemented in July of last year, with a third daily Amtrak train to Norfolk and a second daily Amtrak train to Roanoke. The next set of rail enhancements and additional service would come as we complete the phase 1 package of improvements in 2026. So we'll get additional frequency for both Amtrak and VRE at that time. Phase 2, scheduled to be complete in 2030. That brings us the completion of the Long Bridge and opens up a considerable amount more capacity in that corridor and enables us to then layer in more service. So our long-term strategy getting through this particular package of projects will double the state-supported Amtrak service that's going into Union Station in DC every day. It gives us the ability to also increase that Virginia Railway Express service and to make some changes for VRE in terms of the timing of those trains and the days that those trains operate as well. We can go to the next slide. Long Bridge, I'll just touch on Long Bridge very briefly. It's not one bridge, it's actually a package of 7 bridges. This is a very complex infrastructure project where we are threading a new 2-track passenger rail bridge between a 100-year-old existing 2-track rail bridge that will continue to carry CSX trains, 16-foot wide bike pedestrian bridge that we will construct parallel to our new rail bridge, and then there's a Metro Rail Yellow Line bridge that is just adjacent. So we are threading the needle on this project. Actually, from an implementation perspective, we're now at about 30% design, which is a huge milestone for us because that means we're getting closer to moving this project into a design build procurement, which we're going to do through 2 packages that we'll put out opportunities for later this year. But basically the south package is from the North Shore side there before you get into the East and West Potomac Parks. Back across the bridge is really the big bridge across the Potomac River and the tie-in on the Virginia side. The north package takes it from that end and then literally threads that new rail connection through several other highway structures, very close to some key buildings, and then into Union Station. So very complex project, something that we're really excited about because this is what unlocks rail capacity for the Commonwealth and, quite frankly, everybody south of us as well. We can go to the next slide. The last big corridor that's in implementation right now is our Western Rail Corridor, and this is the connection to the New River Valley. This was another landmark arrangement, this one with Norfolk Southern, where we have over $300 million worth of infrastructure improvements in this corridor. It's going to enable us to extend passenger rail service into the New River Valley, giving us what is estimated to be about 80,000 net new riders a year on passenger rail in that corridor. The Roanoke trains already do extraordinarily well. So this is extending that out to the Blacksburg-Christiansburg area, and this is on track for us to provide that service beginning in 2026. And then we can go on. So that's the last slide. You did, and I appreciate that you had an item on the agenda today for a letter of support for our corridor ID program. It's not in the slide deck, but I'll mention briefly, we're working on 2 corridors at DRPT. One is the extension of that Western Rail Initiative further south through Bristol and on into Point South from there. So that's one of our corridor ID applications. The other is for the Commonwealth Corridor, which is east-west, an east-west connection. These applications just allow us to do continued planning, and that continued planning work still lives at DRPT until these projects are ready to move forward for implementation. There is one other corridor ID application that is coming forward for the Commonwealth, and that is on the S line with the Richmond to Raleigh corridor, and that is working, actually North Carolina DOT is submitting that in partnership with VPRA. And that corridor is in, we have a NEPA decision on it. That corridor is further along in development, and that's something that VPRA is also working on. And so with that, that's the lightning round of DRPT. It's a busy place. We're proud of the work that the team is doing. I'm lucky because I've got a great group to work with every day. We could use a few more people, but things are going well. With a $1 billion program and 72 folks, we stay real busy, but really proud of the team, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I think we will have some questions. Mr. Hodges, we'll start with you.
Impressive presentation. The town of Ashland's very grateful for all the support we get from DRTP. In the context of the freight rail derailment in Ohio, recognizing this opens up a whole can of worms, but could someone direct me to where I could read up about safety-related issues? I commend the Commonwealth in focusing on doing more rail carriage of cargo, but that does raise safety concerns. So if someone could just let me know where I could do some research, that would be appreciated.
So just to kind of set the stage, rail regulation and rail safety in the Commonwealth is vested in the State Corporation Commission by the Code of Virginia. So State Corporation Commission is the entity that is empowered with all of the FRA regulations. They are that regulatory arm for the Commonwealth. I can tell you that from the administration's perspective, we've spent a lot of time over the past few weeks, myself, VPRA, the State Corporation Commission, the Governor's Office, talking to both Norfolk Southern and CSX about what we're doing here in Virginia, how we would respond if something did happen, what is done to prevent something like this happening, and the safety mechanisms in place. So it is a very timely conversation, and it is one that we have spent a considerable amount of time talking about to make sure that that we're doing everything we can from a safety perspective, and two, that we would also be prepared to respond if something happened.
Great, thank you. That's reassuring.
You're going to ask about pilot programs and rural microtransit, aren't you?
Sounds like I'm going to be speaking for the rural counties here in unanimity. But you mentioned, the micro transportation pilots in Wise County and Gloucester County, and you said it had also been expanded to other areas of the state. Obviously, you've got an audience here with the rural counties that are part of this organization. I don't expect you to go into any great detail today because of the time constraints, but if you could just briefly touch on the nature of those pilots. And my second question is, for rural counties, you with all of your tentacles in public transportation with federal, state monies, et cetera, what do you see as the future of public transportation for rural counties?
Great question. So let me start with, in Wise County and in Gloucester, both of those jurisdictions already had local public transportation. So we were not starting anything from scratch. We were changing the way that they were delivering public transportation and expanding the scope. So those communities already had a foundation and an operator and a relationship there. We were able to use technology to make what they had better. So that is a much easier place to start than to start in a community that doesn't have public transportation. Mr. Peterson walked out at the perfect time, but in Hanover County, and I will just say, I happen to live in Hanover County, but in Hanover County, they had brought forward to the TPO a concern about, senior populations, individuals living with disabilities, and how that community in Hanover, there was a need to have more transportation. We were able to work with them and the TPO to develop something that then became a resource, but it's not free. So, we helped them build something. They contracted it with a private contractor who operates that service on their behalf. You call, you make your arrangement. I'm talking about Hanover Dash. You came right back in at the right time. You pay your $6 for your trip, and it gets you to where you need to go in the county, to healthcare institutions outside of the county, and certain amount of buffer area around that. We've covered about 80% of that cost with the federal grant, but the county has come to the table with the local money that is necessary to help match that. So, it's a partnership, and it takes a lot of work to get there. it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. New Kent has a microtransit pilot coming with GRTC, and it's new service because there's not any service in New Kent County right now, but that microtransit is all about connecting those folks to the trunk line of GRTC system. So it's microtransit that gets them onto GRTC, not microtransit that takes them wherever they want to go.
Bay Transit was already.
Yeah, and Bay Transit was already operating in New Kent County as well. So there was a core of transit in that community as well. So we have some different solutions. We're happy to work with you. You've got Tiffany that's here with you. We have resources that we can tap into from the state and federal perspective, but it does take that local commitment to public transportation to really help these projects be successful in the long run.
Well, if I may follow up on your comment, then I'll yield to other questions. But you had mentioned that GRTC in New Kent County was connecting to the trunk lines for GRTC, that was in New Kent County.
It's connecting to a GRTC line in Henrico. GRTC is not going into New Kent, but it's connecting to that line that's.
Okay, we don't have any such connection in Powhatan County with the GRTC pilot. And that's important because the representation is that we were going to be bringing rural counties and connecting them to the region. That's not happening with the pilot area in Powhatan County. That's just a comment.
And that is not a pilot that we funded out of our program. That's one that GRTC is doing with regional funds. And so those are local decisions, regional decisions by the transit agency. But in our case, GRTC submitted all of the microtransit areas, but the parameters for our transit ridership incentive program that are established by code are making regional connections. And to do that, we have interpreted that from a microtransit perspective to mean connecting to the core urban transit system.
And if you would you send me information about the pilots that you did, in Wise County, and Gloucester, where you use technology to enhance the existing transportation that they had in place?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that make that available if you would, because in the beginning you talked about data. You speak through data, and I think where Mr. Williams was going, I'm real curious about the data. Now, they had an existing framework in Wise and Gloucester. Did they connect to
They already had their own.
And they already had the connections, yeah. So he asked a second question that he said, you asked, what do you see as the future of public transit in rural areas? I was gonna just ask that if you could adjust that, if we could adjust that question a little more broadly.
Okay.
What do you see as public transportation like in this particular region? Because like you said, it's case by case basis, and we'll even have case by case in each jurisdiction. But I'm trying to imagine, like for Goochland to the west, and I think a New Kent is comparable to Powhatan, and you're doing rail and bus. So do you see a future of, and let me back up. I went to a separate event, not a transportation event, but it was the speaker, the gentleman from, I think it was Virginians for High-Speed Rail. And he made a compelling case that we cannot pave ourselves out of the congestion. We can't pave ourselves even back to, 20 years ago in terms of, the volume of cars on the road. So given that fact, then something's gonna change. And so I'm real curious, do you see rail coming from, Eastern Goochland rail to get you to downtown Richmond and other points? And tying to that, I'm wondering what's the role of buses when I looked up Virginia Breeze I didn't know where the Highlands Trail was, and I looked and I see Bristol to DC, but then we're also building out rail. So I guess for this region and for the state, I see competing between buses and rail.
There's no competition. We're all in it together with the same mission.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we want them to be effective and functional and also profitable. So I'm just wondering, is one going to or will they always coexist? Will a robust rail network coexist with a robust bus network in this region?
So let me go back and I'll start with your Virginia Breeze question. Right, today we have rail from Roanoke to DC. We also have Virginia Breeze service that starts in Blacksburg and goes to DC. The difference is the Virginia Breeze makes intermediate stops. Not everybody's going to DC. So some folks get on in Blacksburg and they get off in Harrisonburg, or they go from Blacksburg to Dulles Airport, where we have a stop at the arrivals deck. So it depends. And so there's a place for both types of transportation, because our Virginia Breeze has record ridership and is doing quite well from a fare box recovery perspective when compared to our peers around the country. The same with the Amtrak service. So there is, a multimodal transportation system that meets different types of needs and different types of travel expectations is what we seek to provide. We launched the Highlands Rhythm connection to Bristol in November of 2021. And that really we saw is like, let's test, we can put a bus out there and test the water for what does it look like to get from Bristol to DC? How much demand is there in that corridor? So it's a precursor to rail in some places, but it also doesn't mean that we need to replace that bus with rail ultimately, if that's the decision that needs to be made. So I just wanted to touch on that. In terms of the Richmond region, I would say that the decisions about what kind of transportation are needed in this Richmond region lie with this body. The planning, whether it's highway or transit or rail, that comes back to you. That vision starts here with you with the long range plan. And it's not my place or my agency's place to come in and tell you what that needs to look like. What we can do is when you decide what that looks like, we can help you accomplish that mission through more detailed planning, more project development support, and also with funding. And so I take that separation of responsibilities between the Commonwealth and between the MPO or the TPO in this case, I take that very seriously. That's not our role. We will support you. We're here to help you, but those decisions lie here. Now, do I think we'll see rail from parts of the Richmond region into the core of downtown? Rail is extremely expensive. Bus is very flexible, very nimble. We can adapt and change. You guys come up with whatever plan you want, but I'm much more able to make things happen from a bus perspective than rail. And then the intercity passenger rail, though, that is something that's a Commonwealth space, that's a Commonwealth role, and that's where we can look at the whole state and, quite frankly, the region, the whole East Coast, and work with our partners to help deliver products that are helpful in keeping people off of 95 because they're going to Main Street Station, they're getting on the Amtrak train, and they're leaving here to go wherever they're going, but they're not clogging up 95 in downtown at the same time.
Well, I appreciate your answer. I think you're making the case that you have the data and you have the knowledge and you have the resources to tell us what's working. I mean, because we can sit here and I can dream, okay, I think a rail would be neat from Centerville to downtown Richmond. And I know I want to go back to you, at the very beginning, you talked about the commuter. It's no longer eight in the morning to 5. Can you expand on that a little bit, and where do you see that going? I think that's a
It's a big if. I mean, here in this region, and I would say with the leadership and direction of the governor, we've seen the state workforce come back downtown. And so we've seen commuting patterns change over the last year. I think the workforce today expects more flexibility. And so what we're seeing is people's hours start to shift. So where you had a traditional 9 to 5, 8 to 5 day, people might take their first call at home and come into the office a little bit later, or shift their schedule to accommodate the needs of their family. I think we all learned through the pandemic when we were working at home, you had to be able to balance the family stuff and the work. So I think what I have seen, what the data has shown us, is that the commuting pattern is different now. And so instead of high, particularly for commuters, high frequency transportation, maybe in the peak periods in the morning and the afternoon, what you might need is more frequent service, maybe not as frequent as what you had in the peak period, but you'd have more all-day service so that you can meet those different needs of people wanting to travel different times of day and still being able to make those trips by transit. There's been a huge impact in Northern Virginia where you have a lot of commuter bus that would leave Fredericksburg at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, get on 95. That service now, instead of just running it in those morning and evening peak periods, they're now running buses during the middle of the day because people want to go in at 10 and they want to come home at a different time. People want and expect more flexibility. And we need to be able to help meet those needs if we expect them to take something other than a single occupant vehicle.
Ms. Jordan?
Thank you so much, Chair Lumpkins. Great presentation. I really didn't know about the Virginia Breeze, and I was looking at the routes on there. Is there a consideration of adding a route on 64 to go to Hampton or Norfolk or Virginia Beach?
So one of the unique features of the Virginia Breeze program is that we do not put one penny of state money into that program. It is all fare box revenue and federal money. And the federal money that we use requires that we are making rural connections. And so it has to have meaningful rural connections in order to be eligible for that funding. So we did do a study last year that looked at connections to Hampton roads, but because of the census designation of the 64 corridor, we don't really have meaningful stops. So connections between Hampton roads and Richmond aren't eligible for that federal money. So it's a little bit of a trying to figure out what makes it work. We looked at running service up through Gloucester and kind of up through the Middle Peninsula and Northern Neck as an alternative. And it just didn't make sense at this time from a ridership perspective. And so we've kind of paused on that, but we are always looking for where can we make additional connections. We may go back and look, maybe there's something in the 460 corridor that we could look at that would be eligible and would provide that Hampton Roads to Richmond connection just in a different corridor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peters?
I just wanted to reinforce what the rule said. Using Hanover Dash as an example, Hanover County identified that we had a need to serve our elderly and disabled. That's when DRPT came in and helped us make it happen. We didn't have the ability or the expertise to do it on our own. But as Mr. Brule said, it was initiated by us identifying the need, and then we said, help, and she was there to help.
Thank you. I know we still have other things on the agenda, but are there any other questions? I think we could talk longer, but this is great, and I've been looking forward to getting more information, and you do have your plate full, a lot going on.
You have great representation of our agency here with Tiffany. You are the project manager for the microtransit. She's the project manager for the microtransit projects. So you have access to all the data, the research, everything. She's our innovation coordinator in
For the
office.
WISE Gloucester project?
Yep,
Almost every microtransit project that we have currently in the state.
Yes,
That's
so
awesome.
I leave you in very talented and capable hands.
That's good to know.
Thank you for inviting me to be here today. It was great, and you guys asked great questions. Happy to come back anytime.
Thank you again. Thank you. If everybody's doing okay, we'll keep going. To item 2 on new business, the transit asset management performance targets.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Today I'm asking for action on the Tier 2 transit asset management performance targets. Just like the federal highway performance targets that are required, transit agencies also have federal targets. And these targets are found in the transit asset management plans, and that the smaller agencies have the options of either developing their own individual TAMs or they can participate in a group plan. And DRPT has sponsored a group Tier 2 TAM plan, and this plan was published last October after it was adopted by the 33 Tier 2 transit agencies in the state. Bay Transit, which you've just heard, operates here in the region. They adopted these TAM targets themselves. So once adopted by the TPO, the performance targets will be incorporated into our TIP. And the following resolution is presented for your approval. It's resolved that the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization Policy Board adopts the FY 2022 Tier 2 TAM targets and incorporates them into the Transportation Improvement Program. Are there any questions?
Thank you, and that's not on our slideshow, but it's on page
20.
I'm looking for the page number. 20. There we go, 21, the resolution's on on page 21. Any questions of Ms. Ryan?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Williams, move to approve. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Addison. There's a motion and a second to approve, to adopt the resolution as presented. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Coda.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Mr. Winslow.
You had to go aye by proxy.
Chair Lumpkins.
Aye.
Vice Chair Peterson.
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon.
Aye.
Mr. Thornton.
Aye.
Ms. Page.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Mr. Addison.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
Ms. Adams.
Aye.
Ms. Dean.
Aye.
Mr. Totten.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you all, and thank you, Ms. Ryan. Next up is a TIP amendment that Mr. Bushing will present. Mr. Bushing, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This item is a TIP amendment requested by VDOT. If you'll recall, a few months ago, this board acted to add the I-64 gap improvement segments A and B to the TIP. This amendment would revise the planned obligation information, financial information on segment A. So a little bit of background on it. We only had the preliminary engineering phase when we added this project back in, I believe it was November. This request adds the right-of-way and construction phases, so the full project would be included, all three phases. This is a fully state-funded. There are no federal funds that would be obligated with this request. And this is really being driven by the project schedule. The RFP is scheduled for this spring, and then this fall is the design build contract award scheduled. So this is really driven by the schedule to go ahead and add the full project into the TIP at this time. Again, this is state funding, so this is being included as a informational item because it is regionally significant, not because of any federal dollars. So just a quick overview of the three segments of the I-64 gap. The segment in question is the purple on the top left. So it's exits 205 to 214. The other segment in orange in the middle is the other piece that's in the TIP, but that one's not being revised at this time. And this is the breakdown of the planned obligations or the state funding that's on the project. So the right-of-way phase would be $1 million that would be added. And the construction phase is just under $250 million for a total cost of $277.8 million for the full gap of 205 to 214. So the TAC reviewed this request at their past meeting and unanimously recommended approval. So the action that is requested from the board today is that the board amend the FY21 to FY24 TIP to add $1 million in other state funding for right-of-way in fiscal year 2023 and $249.8 million in other state funding for construction in fiscal year 2023. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Mr. Wisham? Ms. Jordan?
Thank you, Chair Lumpkins. So what is the total price for this entire thing? Because I don't know if I missed that in our last presentation on it, but over $250 million. Just, it's a little bit alarming, to be honest.
Correct. So that's this phase, and I'll defer to VDOT on the full project, but I believe it's around $750 million.
Yes, that's as good a number as we have right now.
So it'll go up, is what I'm hearing.
We'll find out as the progress goes forward, but yeah, that's a very conservative number right now, $750 million.
Do you have a breakout for what is, I'm guessing the bridge part is probably the more expensive.
So this segment in particular does not have many bridges. It only has two bridge elements, and I believe it is the segment all the way to the east that has the most bridges. But yes, there certainly are bridge components to each section. But the largest component of this is simply adding the additional pavement.
Okay.
That's really the cost.
Motion approved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second.
Peterson, Mr. Peterson and Mr. Williams got it. Thank you. Ms.
I
Guthrie?
was just gonna add that the General Assembly has not arrived at a budget yet, but on the House proposal for the budget, there was additional money for I-64 that's still up in the air for the next biennium.
I'm so sorry, could you repeat that?
The House and Senate are at loggerheads over the budget right now. They could not come to agreement on anything other than a bare minimum budget. So on the House side, there is a proposal to add more funds for I-64. I don't believe it was in the Senate budget. So until they resolve their differences and decide whether they're going to have additions to the very basic budget, we won't know if there's additional funds for the I-64 widening.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Page.
In the fall, recently, it was a press release that the Biden administration had allocated over $2 million for the I-64 widening. So has that not is that still in legislation, or I don't understand why that announcement would have gone out.
That's nothing.
Yeah. Anybody can help field that question?
So I think,
Mr. Todd.
I don't know that that question has been fully answered yet on any of the grant prosecution, if you will. Certainly on this segment, it does not have any federal funds on it, to my knowledge. Mark, am I saying that correctly? So I think we are still in kind of a holding pattern on grant prosecution at the federal government level.
Okay, thank you.
But again, for this segment, as it's presented, it's all state funding.
And when you're talking about budgets and all, we're in the middle of the biennium, aren't we?
Yes, so this was an additional allocation for the remaining
of the biennium.
Biennium,
And so,
for the next year.
okay.
Yeah.
So Mr. Lumpkins, if I could, if there were, let's say that there were additional funds that would come out of the General Assembly action, additional funds included in the budget, they would be applied to the other two segments. This segment is already under prosecution. We haven't moved forward with those other two segments yet, but certainly as those two segments move forward over the next several years, we would see that funding getting deployed. Should it be approved at the General Assembly level.
Okay, Mr. Carroll.
Mr. Chair, my question would be to VDOT that, number one, my understanding was that initially, or already, the General Assembly had set aside $470 million towards the project. And then we know that there was also a grant issued by the federal government for $25 million. And then there was also $100 million that was pledged by the CVTA.
Right.
And I believe in smart scale, the CTB awarded, I think, 162 million additional funds towards the project. Is that right?
I can't respond to the last part. I don't know that the CTB has taken any action yet.
Okay.
But on the other elements, I believe you're accurate. Again, this segment just has the state funding on it at this point.
Okay.
But yes, there are other revenue streams associated with the total project.
Thank you.
All right, I believe there's a motion and a second. Any more discussion? I think the discussion is concluded. We will take a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Coda?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Chair Lumpkins?
Aye.
Vice Chair Peterson?
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon? Aye. Mr. Thornton?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Carmack?
Aye.
Mr. Addison?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
No.
Ms. Adams?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Totten?
Aye.
Second. And the motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bushing. You're up next again, or staying on board for the TIP and Connect RVA conformity projects list.
Sure. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So this item is related to the draft FY24 to FY27 TIP, which is currently under development. You'll recall we had a few updates on the staff progress reports back in the fall, but essentially since August or September, we've been working with VDOT, DRPT, and all of our member agencies to develop the new TIP for the next round of 4 years. And that process is finally getting ready to move toward public involvement. So we're almost ready to release the drafts. As part of that process, we're required to go through the air quality conformity assessment, the regional conformity assessment. The region is currently in attainment for all of the national ambient air quality standards. However, under a 2018 court ruling, we're still having to go back to the 1997 standards and demonstrate that we're still in compliance and not backsliding. So this assessment includes all of the former maintenance area, which is Charles City, Chesterfield, Henrico, Hanover, the city of Richmond, Ashland. So it's any of the agencies or any county projects in any of those areas. So it's every project from the constrained long-range transportation plan, any individual ungrouped project in the new draft TIP, and then any local or private projects that are regionally significant that would impact air quality, major capacity type improvements. So as part of this process, this board must approve the list of the projects that are in your agenda packets so we can advance them forward to that conformity assessment. What we do then is we combine all those projects with the projects from the Tri-Cities area, since it's one big area for the urbanized area. And then we have an interagency consultation meeting. So that's scheduled for March 14th. That meeting is basically federal agencies, state agencies, and all the local agencies meeting together to agree on the process for the assessment and the project lists. And then once that's approved, the TAC would be able to review the actual draft report that goes with this assessment. Based on scheduling, this request also includes authorization for the TAC to open the public review. This is the same process we've gone through for the past couple of TIP cycles. It's just the way that the project development schedule works and getting the information from VDOT and translating it into our TIP. Timing wise, this is what we have to do. But basically, the TAC would review the draft report and then open up a public comment period to run concurrently with the draft comment period on the new TIP. So TAC has reviewed this request and they unanimously recommended approval. The resolution before you goes through those two steps. So it's approving the attached list of ungrouped projects from the TIP and the Connect RVA 2045 as the universe of projects for this conformity assessment. And then authorizing the TAC to review and open public comment on the draft TIP and conformity assessment at their March 14th meeting. With that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bushing. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hodges?
And I apologize if you mentioned that. What's the difference between yellow, which I assume is yes, versus no?
Yes, sir. So
What's
the yellow projects are those that are considered regionally significant. So those are the ones that would have capacity impacts on arterials or above generally, or major new transit service. Everything that's in white in there is included for information since it's part of the project list, but they're not regionally significant, so they wouldn't be involved in any sort of modeling if it were still required.
In the last column, what does that mean?
I'm sorry.
Reg Sig for AQ.
Regionally significant for air quality. So that's the what determines yellow or white. And this is the standard VDOT template that we presented. So this is the template we submit back in.
Any other questions? On the agenda, that's item 3, which we just voted on a little while ago, says FY21 through FY24. And now this one is FY24 through FY27. I'm a lawyer, but I got an accounting degree, so I know a little bit about numbers, but I'm trying to figure this one out. 21 to 24, that's 4 years. And you talked about a 4-year 24 to 27, that's also 4 years. So it seems like FY24, does that overlap?
Correct. So there's always an overlap year, which basically gives us a grace period to get everything completed. So we wouldn't potentially run afoul of any federal requirements. So basically we do 3 full years and then the 4th year is translated over into the new document in the fall.
So when we're adopting something like this one, we're changing the current tip as well, if you're impacting FY '24, right?
So those projects, I guess the best way to think of it is they're kept completely separate. So we keep the active tip moving forward as we're amending projects through this whole process of developing the new one.
Okay.
Once it's approved, the new tip is approved and in effect in the fall, there will be a rollover period where any changes that we've made since everything was locked down gets moved into the new document as well. So they will match up eventually, but right now there will be some differences as that rollover process hasn't happened yet.
Thank you. And could you give me more of a layman's explanation of conformity assessment, conformity report, conformity analysis?
Sure.
What does that mean?
So basically what that entails generally is modeling all of the major improvements that are in the region and looking at the potential air quality impacts. So what pollution would be generated from those improvements and making sure that that doesn't make it worse in an area that is already impaired and you're making progress towards improving the air quality. Because this is a special situation where it's based on a court ruling, we have a bit of an abbreviated process, so no regional modeling is required anymore. It's really a process of going through and making sure everyone's aware of the project list and agreeing on the project list. It kind of takes out that modeling step now, but.
Did you capture who moved and seconded?
No, we need one, but we don't have that.
So we need, if there's any other questions, or the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Williams, thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Okay, so motion and second has been made. Any discussion? Another roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Coda?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Chair Lumpkins?
Aye.
Vice Chair Peterson?
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon?
Aye.
Mr. Thornton?
Aye.
Ms. Page? Ms. Page?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Carmet?
Aye.
Mr. Addison?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Ms. Adams?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
And Mr. Totten?
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you all, and thank you, Mr. Bushing. Next item, Smart Scale Recommendation Review, focus on CBTA leveraging impacts. This is marked for 20 minutes. Do you,
It will not take that long.
Right answer.
So is everybody good to hang in there? You want to plow through this, or let me know. Not seeing any indications where you want to take a break, so let's knock this out. Mr. Parsons.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I draw your attention to page 35 in the agenda packet. It's still the big pages, but it's multicolored, starting with green and moving to the right. I wanted to just take a brief minute of your time this morning to talk about the current state of the Smart Scale Round 5 applications. And Mr. Carroll kind of hit on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the I-64 gap. So as it stands in January, VDOT staff made a recommendation of a slate of projects to be approved for Smart Scale funding by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. The CTB will take this up, I believe, in their June meeting to consider action on funding these Smart Scale projects. Just a bit of background, Smart Scale is a very competitive program statewide where every jurisdiction as well as MPO like ours competes on a data-driven evaluation process where projects are scored and ranked and then recommended for funding by the state. So I think that based on the recommendations that have been made by VDOT staff so far, we have, as a region, we've done very well competitively against other regions of the state. What you have in your agenda packet is a list of all of the Smart Scale applications that were submitted for our region. Most of those are jurisdiction applications. You can see on the third column, the sponsor, that shows who submitted the application originally. And it is sorted by sponsor, so it starts with the town of Ashland and ends up at the end with the TPO. Other information in the table, the total cost, the year of expenditure estimate for each project. And then the two purple columns from left to right, the round 5 benefit score. That is the scoring that was given to each project application based on the raw benefit of the project to the locality or the region. The second column there, the round 5 benefit to cost score, is what happens when you factor in the cost with that benefit. So you can see that the scoring goes down. A higher cost project is going to have typically it'll be a lower score for that area. The lighter blue columns to the right of that, the CBTA regional leveraged, if there is a number in that column, that is a column that has been evaluated and ranked by the CBTA also to show and has been committed to by the CBTA to leverage additional CBTA regional dollars. So the first one you see there, 9014, is the Route 360 Woodlake to Otterdale widening. The CBTA committed $20 million to leverage that. And the whole purpose of that, which was one of the big goals of the CBTA, so if you can imagine, if you look at the cost benefit score for that Route 360 project, it's 2.67. The benefit of leveraging additional money on a project like that is you bring down that overall cost so that the cost benefit score will be improved. So ideally, anything that you can leverage additional funds on, whether it's CBTA or local or some other source, will perform better theoretically in the smart scale process. So what staff has done, and this is kind of a first look at possible benefits, so we're continuing to revise this, is based on the scoring in round 5, what additional leverage might have been needed on any one of these projects that were submitted for smart scale to make it hit that threshold for a positive score and recommendation for funding. So we took the information that we know based on the scoring criteria and everything else that was set up for round 5 of smart scale, and found that threshold for the positive scoring criteria. Like once a project gets to this level, it's most likely going to receive a yes vote from VDOT staff. So that's the number you see under additional leverage needed. And then moving over to the far right, what is the recommendation from VDOT staff for CTB to consider? So you can see the yes, no for each of those, and so that shows where the projects were eventually ended up in the January recommendation list. So a couple kind of before I turn it back over to the chair, a couple notes to make. Any of the projects in that table that were leveraged with CBTA dollars, those projects overall had a positive recommendation about 37% of the time. When you look at all of the apps in the Richmond region, the recommendation was positive about 21% of the time. So generally, we could say if CBTA dollars were committed to it, to leverage that cost down, they were more successful in getting a recommendation. I think another maybe more telling metric is that for every dollar that the CBTA put into a commitment, the return based on the positive recommendations was over $6. So that's a good return on the leveraging that CBTA is able to provide. And that analysis could be done for total leveraging too. We were just kind of keying in on the CBTA impacts. So with that, I think the other thing to note, Mr. Carroll had asked earlier about the CTB commitment to I-64, and that recommendation was $161.4 million for smart scale funding in round 5, which would round out the balance of that 29-mile gap. Mr. Chair, that's a quick run through, and this has gone through the TAC all the CVTA committees, so everyone, local staff is well aware of the analysis as well.
This has gone through all these things, this being the analysis that you've done, and
Yes, sir.
including the additional leverage
Yes.
needed component. Mr. Williams, yes.
All right, first, Chad, I want to thank you and your staff. This is good information. And we've been asking these questions about, okay, what are the criteria? How are we scoring? What do we need to do next time so that we can score and get funded? So this is excellent until it changes again. But for this point in time, this is excellent, so I wanted to thank you for that. So I understand in the column, was it ROI, return on investment? Is that what that stands for? Okay, if I'm looking at a Powhatan project and I'm seeing red 0.44, does that mean that this is the percent attainment or this is the percent? What does that, give me that definition again, because, you know, I'm gonna be taking this back to the county today. And I wanna be able to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So give me that definition again. What am I looking at? If I see red, and I'm seeing 0.44.
Yes,
What
sir.
does that mean?
I'm gonna, so I don't say something incorrectly, I'm gonna ask Mr. Bushing to come up, but while he's making his way up, I did want to clarify, and you made a good point. This analysis is just based on round 5.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now internally is doing a deeper dive into all 5 rounds and kind of combining all of the criteria. So this is a good indicator for the next time Smart Scale is out there,
But it's
but
not set in
the
stone.
criteria will most likely change.
Right.
So it's not gonna be a yes or no question, but it should at least inform.
It will guide us.
Inform the decision making.
Sure, so thanks again. To answer the question about ROI, the approach there was the total cost of the project minus whatever was leveraged over that leverage. So it's basically how many dollars are you getting back per dollar of leverage that you're putting in. So a 0.44 in this case would suggest you're getting 44 cents back for every dollar that you leverage. So the greens are generally ones where it's a 1-to-1 or higher, and red means you're getting less than $1 back for every dollar you leverage.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, quick question.
Don't go anywhere, Matt.
Quick question. On benefit score and BC score, explain the significance of those numbers, how those derive in blue, first 2 blue.
Sure, so the benefit score is the score that when it goes through all of the different criteria that Smart Scale looks at, that's the total score. So there's columns of different scores. So for example, safety, they look at the total number of crashes in the project area, and then there's another category for the frequency, so divided by the miles traveled on that road. And those are all normalized, so every project gets a 0 to 100 score in each of those categories, and it's weighted, so safety has a certain value, and they add those weights up, and that gets you the benefit score. So the benefit score is theoretically a 0 to 100 score. The benefit cost is then divided by the project cost in tens of millions of dollars. So this is basically what Mr. Parsons was mentioning, the lower cost projects that has the opportunity to bring up your overall score because you get the benefit times whatever whereas anything that's above $10 million, your score drops at that point. So and the benefit cost is really what is the prioritized metric. That's what's actually the rankings for when funding is allocated as part of the staff recommended scenario.
So the benefit cost gets you more points.
The benefit cost is the most important piece in the scoring.
Okay.
And your leveraged outside money improves that, obviously.
Correct. So the cost is not the total project cost, it's the cost to the Smart Scale program. So if you have other money that's leveraged, that brings that cost down.
Mr. Chair, as an example that was, that was used earlier, the 360 Wood Lake Otterdale widening. You look at started out at 5.28 and dropped to 2.67. And if you go with additional leveraging where it says, if we had funded additional $7.5 million, then that number of 2.67 probably been closer to 5.28. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It would have been at whatever the threshold was, which I believe was a 4 point something.
Yep, so it would have moved up if we had added additional money to that because it would have needed less funding from Smart Scale to meet the projection to fund the whole project.
Karen and Patterson Henrico put a certain amount of money into it, and the more money he put in, the closer we got to getting it done. I don't know, did we get to 14 million, I think? I know it started at 7. And when we added on money, we said, okay, we'll pay for this, whatever. Anyway, the money you put in improves your benefit because it costs, which you said is the most important. So you gotta up your.
So you buy down your project, in other
Yes.
words, really we gotta buy it down, is what you're trying to do. Maybe irrespective of safety and environmental and other issues.
So I think,
Irrespective, basically, that's what you're doing.
I think your footnote in the, or whoever did the footnote under the additional leverage needed, there's a footnote at the end. I think that answers my question, but when I saw that initially, I'm trying to think, how does this analysis, how does this tool help us without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight? Aren't we competing for a limited pot of dollars? And if we are competing for a limited pot of dollars, then this leveraging just, from my perspective, it almost feels like it's a race to the bottom. But if we all are pitching in, we're still gonna end up where we were. It's just guessing where, others are going to do, and, I mean, so how can this tool help this TPO and these individual counties with the next round?
Sure, so as Mr. Parsons mentioned, this is phase 1 of what we're working on. So phase 2 is looking at all 5 rounds across the history of Smart Scale and looking at every project that hasn't been successful to date. What that'll allow us to do is look at what has been the highest cutoffs, what have been the lowest cutoffs, and we can get a range of scenarios of what leveraging would have been needed in all these different scenarios. I think currently we're up to 9 different scenarios we're looking at. And from that, we can develop a good idea of what's generally the amount that would have been needed for the project to be successful. So in what case is it successful 50% of the time or more? And that would help us to develop a threshold of how much leveraging we think the TPO needs to have on a project that's being submitted for future rounds, or a locality for a local project.
But of course, it's always gonna depend, what do other folks do with their own projects? Because it's a ranking, at the end of the day, it's a ranking, right?
Correct. So and again, this scenario, I think to your point, is a sort of race to the bottom, which is why some of the numbers are negative on leveraging needed. It's essentially, what does everyone need to get to that minimum threshold? But there is benefits to having higher scores as well. So if we have higher scores in the district and the locality project list, it actually generally allows us to get more projects in the high priority pot where we're competing statewide, because it gives us a better cutoff essentially. So it allows us to work a little bit more.
That makes sense.
There are benefits, and I think there's a lot of ways that we can explore using it. But the idea of what we're trying to get at is have more idea on a real number for what needs to be leveraged going into the process, as opposed to being able to just examine it on the back end and see what we missed.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of read it and weep kind of thing, but if we can't use this to go forward. Mr. Carroll.
Last point, one of the things that was not addressed in here is the fact that, initially when some of these projects were put in, the actual funding estimates were lower than what VDOT's funding estimates came back at. And so, again, we may put something forward that we believe is at the right recommended funding scenario, and put what we also believe to be the right amount of additional dollars attached to that funding scenario. But when we actually get the estimates from, in the Smart Scale estimate, and I'll use the 360 again, same example, they came back with a $10 million estimate higher than what we initially put the project in for. And so it makes it very hard to gauge how much money you have to put in if you don't have an accurate upfront amendment or cost when you're submitting it in the first place, which is why it's going to be important for these bodies moving forward to make sure that we have, I think as Mr. Williams has pointed out in the past, the right estimates put forward on projects that are not going to get increased as they go through this process and get knocked out because we didn't estimate the price up front, and then put the right amount of leverage towards it. And so that's part of what we've learned and what we need to do with this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. All right, I think we're gonna end up doing what we've had to do the last several times and kick scenario planning overview out another month, unless somebody.
Vehemently rejects.
Yeah. So we've almost been at it for 2 hours. Do we want to stretch a little bit and then knock this out in,
I was thinking of German.
want to keep going? If y'all could keep going and take a break.
The rest should be relatively short, Madam Chair.
I think we are. So if, unless there's strong objection, we will jump into agency and committee reports. Mr. Parsons, CBTA.
Thank you very much. Page 39 is the CBTA agency update for today's meeting. There's actually two fall line working group meetings have been held. The second one was yesterday. The group has really been focused a lot on an additional standard project agreement between the CBTA and localities that are planning on administering the projects themselves rather than have VDOT do that. So that is nearing completion in terms of ironing out that agreement, and we expect to have that. I think the goal is to have that to the Finance Committee for the CBTA at its meeting next week. We also yesterday had a great update on the southern section of the fall line design build project that is coming through near the VSU campus and the Appomattox River. So I'd encourage you, if you have time, to tune in to that meeting on YouTube and look at the presentation that VDOT provided. It was very, very informative. The Finance Committee has met February 8th, and the Technical Committee met on the 13th. The Finance Committee had a deep dive, like we just did, into the smart scale recommendations, and had a long discussion on leveraging funds. A lot of the points that Mr. Carroll raised were discussed regarding cost estimates and other mitigating factors. The Technical Advisory Committee is continuing to refine and prepare recommendations on how regional projects are selected. That framework is something that has been adopted by the CBTA and is certainly open to refinement and adjustment over time. So based on the first two rounds of regional project applications, that is currently being done. And we hope that will be to the full authority for consideration over the next few months. Upcoming meetings, the end of March is the next CBTA meeting. And then we have scheduled meetings for the Finance Committee next week, and then the Technical Advisory Committee on the 13th. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? All right, Ms. Adams, thank you for hanging in with us. GRTC is up next. Yeah, so we'll come back. Ms. Dean?
Good morning.
Good.
It's good to see everyone. As I indicated last month, we were in the process of upgrading our express lanes. We went live with the Downtown Expressway last month. We went live with Powhite North just this past Monday. And we will go live with Powhite South, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And so we are pleased that we are on track with regard to the express lane upgrades. The RRTA will have its monthly meeting on March the 14th. So that's all I have. If there's any questions on.
Were the upgrades flawless and did they go perfectly?
So, yes, I'll say yes. I can't say everything is flawless, but they went as anticipated, and we are collecting revenue, and we are working very closely with VDOT. So, yes.
Thank you for staying with us and for the update. Ms. Cheryl Adams, can you hear us?
Yes, I apologize. I had to run to a different meeting. We have a lot going on here, unfortunately, today at RRTC. So I do not have any updates for the group this morning, but thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
And good luck with everything going on today.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Mr. Todd?
Mr. Parsons covered many of the things in my monthly report, so hopefully this will be short. That's perfectly all right. Yeah, you know, it's always difficult being the last one to speak and keeping everybody from getting out the door, so I'll make it brief. Just be advised, we have not received a schedule for the 6-year plan public hearing schedule yet at this point. Just be on the lookout for that next. We expect to hear normally about this time, but the next few weeks we should have that schedule laid out for us, and certainly can update you once that schedule is established. But other than that, everything else has been pretty well covered there. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Future meeting topics, you can look at that it's on the agenda. I think we talked about adding CTAC on there. My screen keeps shrinking. Let me get to the right page. Comments, member comments? Anybody wishing to?
Mr. Chair, I have one comment. On the future meeting topics, I will say that thanks to the hard work of our partners at VDOT and DRPT, we're going to be able to move up the approval of the FY24 UPWP from June to April. So that is under development now, and we'll have it on the agenda for the April 6th meeting.
All right, thank you. All right, any member comments before we wrap up? Next meeting is, well, I'll hopefully see everybody in transportation forum, so we won't have to wait until April to get to see each other. So see you March 17th at Main Street Station, hopefully. And then we will adjourn until April 6th. Everybody have a good March.
You would have green.